The alarm clock buzzed at 5 in the morning, and Rebecca's hand shot out from under the blanket to silence it. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom, gathering the energy to face another day. 3 years. It had been 3 years since cancer took her husband, and some mornings still felt like the first day all over again. She dragged herself out of bed and tiptoed past her children's room. Through the cracked door, she could see them sleeping peacefully. Her daughter Lily was 8 now, sprawled across her twin bed with her stuffed rabbit clutched tight. Her son Ben, just 5 years old, was curled up in a ball, his tiny snores filling the quiet apartment. They were her whole world, and that world was getting harder to hold together every single day. Rebecca worked as a nurse at County General Hospital. It was honest work, and she was good at it. But honest work didn't always pay enough, especially when you were raising 2 kids alone in a city where rent seemed to climb higher every month. She'd picked up extra shifts wherever she could, sometimes working 14 hours straight, coming home with feet so swollen she could barely get her shoes off. The medical bills from her husband's treatment still arrived in the mail, smaller now but constant, like a leak she couldn't quite fix. She made coffee in the tiny kitchen, the steam rising up to fog the window above the sink. Through the blur, she could see the sun just starting to peek over the apartment complex across the street. Saturday. Thank goodness it was Saturday. Her one day off this week, and she'd promised the kids they'd do something special. Something free, of course. Everything had to be free these days. When Lily shuffled into the kitchen an hour later, still in her pajamas with sleep in her eyes, Rebecca was ready with pancakes. Not the fancy kind from a box mix, just flour and eggs and a bit of sugar. But Lily's face lit up like it was Christmas morning. "Are we still going on our adventure today?" Lily asked, climbing onto the wobbly kitchen chair. "We sure are, sweetheart. We're going hiking up at Forest Ridge. Remember I showed you the pictures online?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, already more awake. "Can we bring sandwiches?" "Already made them," Rebecca said, pointing to the small cooler on the counter. "Peanut butter and jelly." Again. But the kids never complained. Ben stumbled in next, rubbing his eyes with his little fists. At 5 years old, he was all questions and endless energy. "Mommy, will there be bears?" Rebecca smiled and scooped him up, even though her back protested. "No bears, buddy. Just trees and birds and fresh air. Won't that be nice?" By 9 o'clock, they were in Rebecca's old sedan, the one with the check engine light that had been on for 3 months. She couldn't afford to fix it, so she just drove carefully and hoped for the best. The kids sang songs in the back seat, making up silly words that had them all laughing. These moments, Rebecca thought, these were what mattered. Not the pile of bills on her kitchen table or the worn-out shoes Lily was growing out of. Just this. Just them. Across town, in a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, David Chen stood in his walk-in closet trying to remember the last time he'd felt truly happy. At 45, he had everything people said they wanted. Money, success, a company worth hundreds of millions. His tech startup had gone public 5 years ago, making him wealthy beyond anything he'd imagined as a kid growing up in a modest suburb. But his wife had left him 8 months ago. His 2 grown kids, both in their 20s, barely returned his calls. They'd told him in various ways, in various moments of anger, that he'd chosen his company over them. That he'd missed too many birthdays, too many recitals, too many ordinary Tuesday dinners. And they were right. He knew they were right. His therapist had suggested he take time for himself. Real time. Away from the office, away from the never-ending emails and board meetings and conference calls with investors in Tokyo and London. "Do something that has nothing to do with work," she'd said. "Remember who you were before you became a CEO?" David grabbed hiking boots from the back of his closet, still in the box. He'd bought them 2 years ago with grand plans of taking up outdoor activities. They'd sat there untouched while he worked 70-hour weeks and ate takeout at his desk. Today, he decided, would be different. He'd drive out to Forest Ridge, spend a few hours walking among the trees, clear his head, maybe figure out how to fix the mess he'd made of his personal life. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. His assistant had strict instructions not to call unless the building was literally on fire. He wanted to be alone with his thoughts, away from the constant demands and the weight of making decisions that affected hundreds of employees and thousands of shareholders. The drive took 45 minutes. David barely noticed the scenery, his mind churning through the same problems it always did. He thought about calling his daughter but decided against it. What would he even say? Sorry I missed your entire childhood because I was building an empire? The words sounded hollow even in his head. Rebecca's car pulled into the Forest Ridge parking lot just before 10. The lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered vehicles. Good, she liked it quiet. The kids tumbled out of the car, already excited, already racing toward the trailhead before Rebecca could even grab the backpack with their lunch. Slow down, she called, jogging to catch up. Stay where I can see you. The trail started easy, a wide path through tall pines with the morning sun filtering through the branches in golden streams. Ben held her hand, pointing at every bird and squirrel. Lily walked ahead, trying to be grown-up and independent, but never straying too far. Rebecca breathed in the forest air and felt something inside her chest relax just a little. Out here, surrounded by green and quiet, the weight of her struggles seemed lighter. The bills would still be there tomorrow. The broken washing machine in the apartment basement would still be broken. But right now, right this minute, she had sunshine and trees and her beautiful children, and that was enough. David arrived 20 minutes later. He parked his expensive SUV next to Rebecca's beat-up sedan without even noticing the contrast. He shouldered a small backpack containing bottled water and an energy bar, locked the vehicle, and headed onto the trail without checking his phone. That alone felt like an achievement. He walked with purpose at first, as if exercise was just another item to check off a to-do list. But gradually the quiet of the forest began to seep into him. His pace slowed. He actually looked at the trees, noticed how the light shifted through the leaves, heard the sound of a creek bubbling somewhere nearby. For the first time in months, David felt his mind begin to quiet. He took a fork in the trail, choosing the path that led deeper into the woods, away from the main route. He wanted solitude, wanted to be somewhere no one could find him, even accidentally. The path grew narrower, the trees denser. Perfect. Neither Rebecca nor David could have known, as they walked separate paths through the same forest that Saturday morning, that their lives were about to intersect in a way that would change everything. Neither could have predicted that within the hour, one of them would be fighting for their life while the other fought desperately to save it. Rebecca stopped at a scenic overlook, letting the kids peer through the wooden railings at the valley below. The view was breathtaking, all rolling hills and endless trees stretching to the horizon. This was why she'd brought them here, not just for the fresh air, but to show them that beauty didn't cost anything, that some of the best things in life were absolutely free. Look, Mommy, I can see forever. Ben squealed, his little hands gripping the railing. Lily stood beside her brother, more thoughtful. It's really pretty, she said quietly. Then even quieter. Daddy would have liked it here. Rebecca's heart squeezed. She wrapped her arm around Lily's shoulders and pulled her close. Yes, he would have. He really would have. They stood there together for a long moment. Three people who'd been through more than anyone should have to bear, finding peace in the simple act of looking at trees. Then Ben announced he was hungry, even though they'd only been walking for 30 minutes and the moment passed. Rebecca laughed and promised him they'd eat lunch soon. Meanwhile, David had walked nearly 2 miles into the forest. His legs were already getting tired. He wasn't used to this kind of physical activity. His gym membership went unused most months, another thing he paid for but never actually did. He found himself breathing harder than he expected, his heart working to pump blood through a body that spent too many hours sitting in desk chairs and airplane seats. But he pushed on, determined to reach whatever destination his feet seemed to be taking him toward. He didn't have a plan. He rarely did anything without a detailed plan. And maybe that was the point. Maybe sometimes you just needed to walk without knowing where you were going. The woods held its breath, waiting for what came next. David found a fallen log beside the trail and decided to rest for a moment. His chest felt tight, but he figured it was just from being out of shape. He'd been meaning to take better care of himself. His doctor had warned him about his cholesterol at his last checkup, told him to watch his stress levels, maybe take up meditation or yoga. David had nodded and agreed, and then went right back to his 80-hour work weeks. He pulled out his water bottle and took a long drink. The forest was peaceful here, almost completely silent except for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. No phones ringing, no assistants knocking on his door, no emergencies that only he could solve. He closed his eyes and tried to enjoy it. That's when the pain started. At first it was just pressure, like someone had placed a heavy weight on his chest. David opened his eyes, confused. He rubbed at his sternum, thinking maybe he'd pulled a muscle somehow. But the pressure didn't ease. Instead, it grew stronger, spreading across his chest like a hand squeezing his heart. His left arm began to tingle. Then it started to ache, a deep pain that radiated from his shoulder down to his fingertips. David stood up quickly, suddenly frightened. This wasn't a pulled muscle. This wasn't just being out of shape. This was something very, very wrong. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. No signal. Of course there was no signal. He was miles into the forest on a trail he'd deliberately chosen because it was remote. Panic crashed over him in waves. The pain in his chest intensified, becoming a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. David tried to walk back toward the main trail, but his legs felt weak. His vision started to blur at the edges. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air. He made it maybe 20 feet before his knees buckled. He grabbed onto a tree trunk to steady himself, his breathing coming in short, desperate gasps. "Help!" He tried to call out, but his voice came out barely louder than a whisper. "Someone, help." He slid down the tree trunk, ending up sitting in the dirt and dried leaves. The pain was overwhelming now, a vice grip on his heart that made every breath feel impossible. David had never been particularly religious, but he found himself praying that someone would find him, praying that this wasn't how his story ended, alone in the woods, estranged from his children with nothing but money and regrets to show for his 45 years. His phone slipped from his hands. The last thing he saw before darkness crept into his vision was the screen showing those mocking words, "No service." Meanwhile, about 300 yards away, Rebecca and the kids had stopped for an early lunch. Ben had been persistent about being hungry, and truthfully, Rebecca was ready for a break too. They found a nice spot where a massive old oak tree provided shade, its roots creating natural seats. She unpacked the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, along with some apple slices and a bag of pretzels she'd gotten on sale. The kids ate like they hadn't seen food in days, which made her smile. Simple pleasures. That's what life was about now. Lily finished her sandwich first and asked if she could explore a little bit, just around the immediate area. Rebecca hesitated, then agreed. "Stay where I can see you." "And I mean it, Lily, don't go far." "I won't, Mom, I promise." Rebecca watched her daughter wander off, examining interesting rocks and picking up fallen leaves. Ben was working on his second sandwich, getting jelly all over his face in the process. Rebecca used a napkin to wipe his cheeks, earning a giggle and a squirm. That's when Lily came running back, her eyes wide. "Mom! Mom, I heard something!" Rebecca's protective instincts kicked in immediately. "What kind of something? An animal?" "No, I think it was a person. It sounded like someone calling for help, but really quiet, like they were far away." Rebecca stood up, scanning the forest. "Where did it come from?" Lily pointed off the trail toward the denser part of the woods. "Over there, I think. Should we go see?" Every parenting instinct told Rebecca to say no, to pack up their lunch, take her kids, and stay on the safe, marked trail. It could be anything. It could be dangerous. But her nursing instincts were screaming something different. If someone was hurt and calling for help, they might not have much time. "Okay," she said, making a quick decision. "But we stay together, and if I tell you to run, you run." "Understood?" Both kids nodded, suddenly serious. They left the trail, moving carefully through the underbrush. Rebecca kept the kids close, one hand on each of their shoulders. She stopped every few steps to listen. "Hello," she called out. "Is someone there? Do you need help?" "Nothing. Just the sound of wind through the trees and a bird calling somewhere overhead." They walked deeper into the woods, and Rebecca was about to give up and turn back when Lily grabbed her arm. "There, Mom, there's someone." Rebecca looked where her daughter was pointing and saw him, a man slumped against a tree trunk about 50 feet ahead. Even from this distance, she could see he wasn't moving right. His skin looked gray, his body limp. "Stay here," she commanded the kids, her voice sharp with authority. "Both of you, right here. Don't move." She ran toward the man, her nurse training taking over her entire body. As she got closer, she could see the sweat soaking his expensive hiking clothes, the way his chest barely rose and fell, the bluish tint to his lips. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me?" David's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. He tried to speak but couldn't form words. Rebecca pressed her fingers to his neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but weak and irregular. She'd seen this too many times in the emergency room. "Heart attack. A bad one. Lily," she shouted back to where her kids stood frozen. I need you to be brave, sweetheart. Really brave. Can you do that? Yes. Lily's voice was shaky but determined. Run back to the parking lot. As fast as you can. Find someone with a phone and tell them to call 911. Tell them we have a man having a heart attack on the trail. Can you remember that? Heart attack 911. I can do it, Mom. Go, run! Rebecca heard her daughter's footsteps crashing through the underbrush, heading back toward the trail. Ben stood where she'd left him, his little face pale with fear. Ben, buddy, come here, he ran to her side. Sit right here, okay? I need to help this man and I need you to be my helper. Can you be brave like your sister? Ben nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks, but he sat where she told him to. David's eyes were closed again. Rebecca checked his pulse once more. Weaker. She positioned his head, checking his airway. His breathing was becoming more shallow, more labored. Sir, stay with me, she said firmly. Help is coming. I'm a nurse. I'm going to take care of you. She didn't know if he could hear her. She didn't know if help would arrive in time. She didn't know if she could save this stranger's life with nothing but her bare hands and her training. But she knew she was going to try. Rebecca placed her hands on David's chest, one over the other, just like she'd done 1,000 times before. She found the right spot, locked her elbows, and began compressions. Hard and fast, 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. The man's chest rose and fell with her efforts. She counted in her head, keeping rhythm, refusing to think about how long Lily would need to find help, refusing to think about her young son watching this unfold, refusing to think about anything except keeping this stranger's heart beating until the ambulance could arrive. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her arms began to ache. But Rebecca didn't stop. She wouldn't stop. Lily ran faster than she'd ever run in her entire 8 years of life. Branches scratched at her arms and face, but she didn't slow down. Her mom needed her. That man needed her. She had to find help. Her lungs burned and her legs felt like they might give out, but she kept pushing forward. The trail seemed so much longer running back than it had been walking out. Tears streamed down her face, partly from fear and partly from the wind whipping past her as she ran. Please let someone be there, she thought. Please, please, please. She burst out of the tree line into the parking lot, gasping for air. There were only 3 cars. Her mom's beat-up sedan, a fancy SUV, and a minivan near the trailhead. A family was loading up their gear, getting ready to start their hike. Help, Lily screamed, running toward them. Please help. Someone's dying. The father turned around, startled. He was a big man with a kind face and hiking gear that looked brand new. Whoa, slow down. What's wrong? My mom. There's a man. Heart attack. Lily could barely get the words out between gasps. She said call 911. The man's wife immediately pulled out her phone. Where are they? On the trail, but off to the side. My mom's doing CPR, please hurry. The father was already moving. I'm a volunteer firefighter.
Can you take me to them?
Lily nodded, even though her whole body was shaking. This way. Please run. My little brother's there too. The mother spoke rapidly into her phone, giving directions to the dispatcher while her own 2 kids watched with wide eyes from beside the minivan. The father followed Lily as she took off back down the trail, slower this time but still moving as fast as her exhausted legs could manage. Back in the woods, Rebecca's arms were on fire. She'd been doing compressions for what felt like hours but had probably only been 5 or 6 minutes. Her shoulders screamed in protest with every push. Sweat poured down her face, dripping onto David's chest as she worked. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. She couldn't think about anything else. Couldn't think about how her arms felt like they might fall off. Couldn't think about Ben sitting just a few feet away, watching his mother fight to save a stranger's life. Couldn't think about whether this was going to work. Just keep going. Just keep his heart beating. Just give him a chance. David's face was still gray. His lips still blue. But under her hands she could feel something. Not much, but something. A faint flutter of life that refused to give up completely. Come on, she muttered through gritted teeth. Come on, stay with me. Don't you dare quit now. Ben had stopped crying. He sat cross-legged on the ground, clutching his backpack to his chest like a security blanket, watching his mother work with 5-year-old understanding that something very serious was happening. Is he going to die, Mommy? Ben's small voice cut through the sound of Rebecca's heavy breathing. Not if I can help it, baby. Not if I can help it. She heard crashing through the underbrush before she saw them. Lily burst through the trees first, followed by a large man carrying a medical kit. "I'm here."
Mom, I brought help!
Relief flooded through Rebecca, but she didn't stop the compressions. "Volunteer firefighter," the man announced, dropping to his knees beside her. "Tom Mitchell. What have we got?" "Found him about 10 minutes ago. Unresponsive, no pulse, suspected cardiac arrest. I've been doing CPR since." Rebecca's voice was strained from exertion. "I'm a nurse. County General." Tom nodded, already unpacking his kit. "Good work. Let me take over compressions. You're exhausted. I can keep going. I know you can. But let me help." His voice was kind but firm. Rebecca moved aside, and Tom immediately took her place, his fresh arms taking over the rhythm she'd established. She sat back on her heels, her whole body trembling from the effort. Lily ran to her, and Rebecca wrapped one arm around her daughter. "You did so good, sweetheart. So good." Tom worked while talking. "Ambulance is on the way, but they've got to navigate the trails. Might be another 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Rebecca looked at David's face. 10 minutes might be too long. She pulled out her phone. Still no signal. Tom saw her checking. "Yeah, no service here. Wife had to run back to the lot to call it in. She's going to guide the paramedics." Rebecca crawled back beside Tom. "Let me give the rescue breaths. Save your energy for compressions." They worked together in silence, a practiced rhythm born from training and necessity. 30 compressions from Tom, 2 breaths from Rebecca, over and over. Ben and Lily sat huddled together a few feet away, holding hands. After what felt like an eternity, they heard voices. Multiple voices getting closer. The paramedics crashed through the underbrush with their equipment moving fast but controlled. "We've got it from here," the lead paramedic said. A woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "How long has he been down?" "Found him unconscious about 15, maybe 16 minutes ago," Rebecca reported, moving out of their way. "Started CPR immediately. He's had continuous compression since." The paramedics worked with impressive speed, setting up their equipment. They had a defibrillator, oxygen, and IV kit. Within seconds, they'd taken over, checking vitals and attaching monitor leads. "Got a weak pulse," one of them called out. "Thready and irregular, but it's there. Starting oxygen. Get me an IV line." Rebecca gathered her kids, pulling them both close as they watched the medical team work. This was the part she knew well from the hospital, but seeing it happen in the middle of the forest was surreal. Tom stood beside her, both of them breathing hard. "You saved his life," he said quietly. "You know that, right? If you hadn't found him, if you hadn't started CPR immediately." Rebecca didn't know what to say. She was a nurse. This was what she did. But doing it here in the woods with her children watching, with nothing but her bare hands and her training, it felt different somehow. The paramedics got David onto a stretcher. "We need to move fast," the lead paramedic said. "He's stable for now, but he needs a hospital. Is there anyone here who knows him?" Everyone shook their heads. He was a stranger to all of them. "Mom, do you think he'll be okay?" Lily asked, her voice small. Rebecca looked at her daughter's worried face. "I don't know, honey, but we gave him a fighting chance. That's all we could do." They followed the paramedics back to the parking lot, a strange procession through the woods. Tom's wife was there, having guided them in. She immediately hugged her husband, relief written all over her face. The ambulance was parked with its lights flashing. The paramedics loaded David inside, still working on him, calling out vitals and instructions to each other. Before they closed the doors, the gray-haired paramedic turned to Rebecca. "You did good work out there." "Really good. You coming to County General? You said you work there?" Rebecca nodded. "Not until Monday. I'm off today. Figures. Heroes never clock out." The paramedic gave her a tired smile. "We're taking him to County General. If you want to check on him, ask for John Doe until we can identify him. We'll list you as the person who found him." Then they were gone, sirens wailing as the ambulance pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared down the mountain road. The parking lot suddenly felt very quiet. Tom and his family said their goodbyes, making sure Rebecca and the kids were okay before heading back to their van. Tom pressed a business card into Rebecca's hand. "If you ever need anything," he said simply. Rebecca stood there with her kids, watching the dust settle on the road where the ambulance had been. Her arms still ached. Her hands were shaking, and she realized she had no idea who the man was that she'd just spent 20 minutes keeping alive. But she'd see him again. Somehow she knew she'd see him again. 3 days passed before David opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was white ceiling tiles. Then he heard the steady beep of monitors. The smell of antiseptic filled his nose. Hospital. He was in a hospital. His chest hurt. Everything hurt, actually. But he was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. A nurse he didn't recognize noticed he was awake and immediately came over. "Welcome back, Mr. Chen. You gave everyone quite a scare." "Let me get your doctor." Mr. Chen. They knew who he was. Someone must have found his wallet, his ID. David tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The nurse held a cup with a straw to his lips, and he took small sips of water. The doctor arrived within minutes, a man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a calm demeanor. "Mr. Chen, I'm Dr. Phillips. You're at County General Hospital. You suffered a massive heart attack 3 days ago. Do you remember anything?" David closed his eyes, trying to piece together fragments of memory. The forest, the crushing pain in his chest. Darkness. Nothing after that. The woods. He managed to whisper. "I was hiking. That's right. A woman found you and performed CPR until paramedics arrived. Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. Without her intervention, you wouldn't have survived. Your heart had stopped. She kept you alive for nearly 20 minutes with nothing but her hands and her training." The words hit David like a physical blow. Someone had saved his life. A stranger had found him dying in the woods and refused to let him die. "Who?" David asked. "Who was she?" Dr. Phillips smiled. "Her name is Rebecca Walsh. She's actually a nurse here at County General. She's been checking on you every day, even on her days off. Would you like to meet her?" David nodded, unable to form words. His eyes filled with tears, and he didn't even try to stop them. It took another 2 days before David was stable enough for visitors beyond immediate family. His daughter came first, flying in from Seattle. She walked into his room with red eyes and a trembling chin, and they both cried. Really cried. The kind of crying that washes away years of hurt. "I almost lost you, Dad," she whispered, holding his hand. "I almost lost you, and the last thing I said to you was that I was too busy to come for Thanksgiving." "I'm sorry," David said, his voice still weak. "I'm so sorry for everything. For missing so much of your life. For choosing work over you and your brother. I can't get those years back, but if you'll let me, I want to do better. I want to be your dad again." She squeezed his hand tighter. "I'd like that." His son came the next day, driving down from college. The conversation was harder with him, the wounds deeper, but they talked. Really talked. For the first time in years, David listened instead of checking his phone or thinking about work. He heard about his son's classes, his girlfriend, his dreams of becoming a teacher. Things he should have known all along but had been too absent to learn. On the 7th day, Dr. Phillips told him Rebecca was working her shift and asked if he felt strong enough to meet her. "Yes," David said without hesitation. "Please." When Rebecca walked into his room, David was struck by how ordinary she looked. She wasn't a superhero. She was a tired woman in scrubs with her hair pulled back in a ponytail, probably at the end of a long shift. But she'd saved his life. "Mr. Chen," she said with a warm smile, "it's good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Alive, thanks to you." David's voice cracked. "Dr. Phillips told me what you did. You saved my life." Rebecca pulled up a chair beside his bed. "I did what any nurse would do. I'm just glad I was there at the right time. But you were on your day off, in the woods with your kids. You could have just called for help and left. But you stayed. David had to pause to collect himself. "You gave me CPR for 20 minutes. The doctor said your daughter ran for help. Your son watched. This wasn't just a nurse doing her job. This was someone who chose to save a stranger." Rebecca's eyes grew soft. "I couldn't not try. You were someone's father, someone's son. You mattered. Everyone matters." They talked for over an hour. David learned about her life, about losing her husband, about raising 2 kids alone on a nurse's salary, about double shifts and medical bills and the constant stress of never having quite enough. He learned that the day she'd saved him was supposed to be her one day of rest that week. A free day in the woods with her kids because she couldn't afford anything else. Rebecca learned about David's success and his loneliness, about the family he'd pushed away in pursuit of building an empire, about the emptiness of having everything and no one to share it with. "Can I ask you something?" David said quietly. "Why did you refuse the reward?" Rebecca looked confused. "What reward?" "When the hospital tried to contact you on my behalf to offer you something for saving my life, they said you declined." "Oh, Rebecca looked uncomfortable. Mr. Chen, I didn't save you for money. That's not why people should help each other. David felt something crack open in his chest, and it had nothing to do with his heart attack. He'd spent decades in a world where everyone wanted something, where every kindness came with a price tag. Every relationship was transactional, and here was a woman who'd saved his life and wanted nothing in return. You're remarkable, he said softly. Do you know that? Rebecca laughed, but it was a tired sound. I'm really not. I'm just a single mom trying to keep her head above water. Most days I'm not sure I'm doing that very well. How much debt are you carrying? From your husband's medical bills? Rebecca stiffened. That's not really… Please, I need to know. She was quiet for a long moment. About $40,000, she finally admitted. It'll take me years to pay off, but I'm managing. David was already making calculations in his head. What if I told you I wanted to pay that off? Not as a reward, but as a thank you. What would you say? I'd say absolutely not. Rebecca's voice was firm. Mr. Chen, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't need your money. I don't want your money. Why not? You saved my life. Let me help you with yours. Because that's not how this works. Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes intense. If I let you pay my bills, then what I did becomes a transaction. It becomes something I did to get something from you. And that's not what happened. I saved you because you needed saving. That's it. That's all it needed to be. David stared at her, speechless. In his world, nothing was free. Nothing was simple. But Rebecca lived in a different world. One where something still mattered more than money. What about your kids? He asked quietly. College funds? Their future? That's for me to worry about, not you. But I want to worry about it. Rebecca, do you understand what you've given me? I was dying alone in those woods. Alone because I'd pushed away everyone who mattered. My daughter and son were here this week. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. You didn't just save my life. You gave me a chance to fix it. Rebecca's expression softened. I'm glad, truly, but you don't owe me anything for that. They sat in silence for a moment, both thinking. Finally, David spoke again. What if it's not about owing you? What if I just want to help? As a friend? Rebecca raised an eyebrow. We've known each other for an hour. You kept my heart beating for 20 minutes. I think that counts for something. Despite herself, Rebecca smiled. It does count for something. But friendship isn't bought, Mr. Chen, it's earned. Then let me earn it, David said. Let me be someone who helps, not because I owe you, but because I want to be better than I was. Rebecca studied his face for a long moment. Then she stood up, preparing to leave. I need to finish my shift. But Mr. Chen? I'm glad you're okay. I really am, David, he said. Please call me David. David, she smiled. Get some rest. Doctor's orders. After she left, David lay back against his pillows, his mind racing. He didn't know exactly what was going to happen next. But for the first time in years, he was excited to find out. David was released from the hospital 2 weeks later with a list of medications, strict orders to change his lifestyle, and a follow-up appointment with a cardiologist. His daughter insisted on staying with him for a few weeks to help him recover. And for the first time in years, David didn't mind having someone fuss over him, but he couldn't stop thinking about Rebecca. He'd see her occasionally during her shifts, and they'd talk for a few minutes when she checked on other patients in his wing. She never treated him differently than anyone else. She was professional, kind, efficient. But David noticed things, the tiredness in her eyes that never quite went away, the worn-out shoes she wore that had seen better days, the way she'd mentioned picking up an extra shift and he'd see her the next day looking even more exhausted. One afternoon, about a month after he'd been discharged, David was in his office for the first time since the heart attack. His assistant had strict orders that he could only work 4 hours a day. His laptop sat open in front of him, but he wasn't looking at spreadsheets or quarterly reports. He was looking at job postings for his company's new healthcare foundation. The foundation had been his daughter's idea. Dad, she'd said over dinner one night, you almost died. And you were saved by someone who spends her life helping others while barely scraping by. Doesn't that seem wrong to you? It did. It seemed very wrong. David had money. More money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. And his company had been planning to start a charitable foundation anyway for tax purposes. So why not make it mean something? Why not create something that actually helped people like Rebecca? He picked up his phone and made a call. Rebecca was in the middle of her shift when her supervisor asked to see her. Her heart sank. Had she made a mistake? Forgotten something important? She ran through her recent patients in her mind, trying to figure out what she might have done wrong. "Rebecca, please sit down," her supervisor said, gesturing to a chair. "This was bad. This was definitely bad. Am I in trouble?" Rebecca asked, her voice tight. Her supervisor looked confused. "What? No, nothing like that." She smiled. "Actually, it's quite the opposite. I received a very interesting phone call this morning from the Chen Medical Foundation." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "Oh no, what did he do?" "He offered you a job." Rebecca stared at her. "He what?" "Apparently Mr. Chen's company has started a healthcare foundation focused on improving working conditions and support for medical professionals. They're looking for someone to manage their initiatives. Someone who understands what nurses and doctors actually need. Someone with real experience in the trenches, as he put it. He specifically requested you." Rebecca felt her face flush with anger. "I can't believe him. I told him I didn't want his money. I told him." "Rebecca," her supervisor held up a hand. "This isn't charity. It's a real position with real responsibilities. The salary is—" She slid a paper across the desk. "Well, see for yourself." Rebecca looked at the number and felt dizzy. It was more than double what she made now, with benefits that included full health care coverage for her and her kids, a retirement plan, paid vacation time, things she'd only dreamed about. "This has to be some kind of pity offer," Rebecca said, but her voice wavered. "Is it? Or is it a man recognizing talent and trying to do something meaningful with his resources?" Her supervisor leaned back in her chair. "Rebecca, you're one of the best nurses I've ever worked with. You care deeply about your patients and your colleagues. You see problems and you want to fix them. This position would give you the power to actually make changes, to help thousands of healthcare workers instead of one patient at a time. Is that really something you want to turn down out of pride?" Rebecca sat in silence, her mind spinning. That evening, she showed up at David's penthouse apartment. She'd gotten the address from the hospital records, which was probably a violation of some privacy policy, but she was too angry to care. David answered the door in casual clothes, looking healthier than he had in the hospital but still thinner than he should be. His face broke into a smile when he saw her. "Rebecca, this is a surprise. What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, pushing past him into the apartment. David closed the door calmly. "I assume you heard about the job offer. You can't just throw money at me because you feel guilty." "I'm not. I'm offering you a job because you're qualified for it. I'm a nurse, not a foundation manager. You're a nurse who understands what's broken in our healthcare system. You live it every day. Who better to fix it?" David gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, arms crossed. "This is charity dressed up as employment?" "No, it's employment. Real employment. Rebecca, my foundation needs someone who actually knows what nurses need. Not some consultant who's never worked a double shift in their life. Not someone who thinks the answer to every problem is another policy manual. Someone real. Someone who's been there. You have a whole board of directors who could find qualified candidates. I don't want a qualified candidate. I want you." David's voice was firm. "And before you argue that I'm doing this because you saved my life, let me be clear. I'm doing this because when I woke up in that hospital and started really looking around, I saw people like you everywhere. People working themselves to exhaustion. People who care so much about helping others that they sacrifice their own well-being. And I realized I have the resources to change that. But not the knowledge. You have the knowledge." Rebecca felt her anger deflating, replaced by something more complicated. "I don't know anything about running a foundation. You'll learn. I'll help you. My team will help you." David took a step closer. "Rebecca, I know you don't want handouts. I respect that. So I'm not offering you one. I'm offering you a job that will be hard work. You'll be building programs from scratch, fighting bureaucracy, dealing with people who don't want change. It won't be easy. Why does the salary have to be so high then? Because you're worth it. Because you have 2 kids to support. Because you've been underpaid for years and that's not right." David's voice softened. "And because I can afford to pay you what you're actually worth, so why shouldn't I?" Rebecca walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, nurses were working double shifts. Single parents were choosing between paying bills and buying groceries. People like her were struggling every day while people like David lived in penthouses. But David was offering her a chance to actually do something about that. "What about my kids?" she asked quietly. "The hours, the responsibilities. The position includes flexible scheduling. Work from home when you need to. Bring them to the office if you have to. Rebecca, I'm not asking you to sacrifice more. I'm asking you to take a position where you can actually have a life while helping others have lives too." She turned to face him. "If I take this job, we do it right. No special treatment because I saved your life. No cutting corners. If I see something wrong, I say something, even if it's about you or your company." David smiled. "I wouldn't want it any other way. And I want to meet Ben and Lily," he added quietly. "The kids who were brave enough to help save me. I'd like to thank them properly if that's okay." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "They ask about you, actually. They want to know if the man in the woods is okay. Tell them I'm okay because their mom is a hero. I'm not a hero," Rebecca said automatically. "Yeah." David smiled. "You keep saying that. But you're wrong." 2 months later, Rebecca started her new position. It was terrifying and exciting and overwhelming all at once. She worked with doctors and administrators and policymakers. She created programs to support nurses dealing with burnout. She fought for better working conditions and fair wages. She used her voice to speak for the thousands of healthcare workers who didn't have time to speak for themselves because they were too busy saving lives. David kept his promise. He treated her like a professional, not a charity case, but they also became friends. Real friends. He came to Ben's birthday party and taught him card tricks. He helped Lily with a science project. He became part of their lives not as a wealthy benefactor, but as someone who genuinely cared. And Rebecca's work? It spread. Other hospitals started adopting their programs. Nurses across the state began seeing real changes in their working conditions. What started as one woman saving one man's life became something bigger than either of them could have imagined. David eventually reconciled fully with his children. His daughter got married, and he walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. His son graduated and became a teacher, and David couldn't have been prouder. On the 1-year anniversary of that day in the woods, David and Rebecca hiked the same trail together. They stood at the spot where she'd found him, where she'd refused to let him die. "Thank you," David said simply, "for everything." Rebecca looked at him, at this man who'd become such an important part of her and her children's lives. "Thank you for letting me save you, and for helping me save myself." They both smiled, understanding that sometimes life puts the right people in the right place at the right time. And when it does, when we choose to help instead of walk away, when we choose connection over isolation, everything changes. The life saved in those woods wasn't just one. It was two, and in the end, it was so many more.